All right, we pick up with Shemot, also known as Exodus, chapter 35, verse 21. Literally in English, it would say, "And he went they, all men that do he heart he, and all that willing her spirit he, with he brought they, offering Yahweh, to work tent appointed times, and to all service he, and to garments the holy." Again, something we've had before, but getting a little more intense these days with all the info. Can we turn this monitor off, or have we always left it on? Oh, okay. I'll try not to see it. Noticing it this time. All right, so we start off with Vava Bo'u, which is, and he went they, literally. It's to come, to go, to be there, to arrive there, to go there. Remember, to come and to go is the same thing in Hebrew. Because wherever you go, there you are. Anyway, that's the word. So they went, kol, that's all, or every. Ish, that's the word for man. Asher, so every man that nasa'o, that did, every man that did it. It's like saying, I never sneeze, except when I do. That's kind of how Hebrew works, you know? So everyone went, everyone that went for this purpose did something. Is asa, it's to take up, to lift up. It's the idea of raising up and bearing up, and the example that we always give is the waters bore up, the water bore up the ark. The ark did not lift itself up, right? It was not strengthened and lifted up. The water, as it got deeper, lifted the boat up. But this is that idea. Then it says libo, so everyone lifted up in the heart. Someone felt the excitement, if you will, because they're talking about the heart literally, the thing that thumps in your chest and all that. But we also talk about it metaphorically, I guess is the word. I don't know. But it's of the seat of the senses, affections, and emotions of the mind, that sort of thing. So everyone who was all lifted up in their heart, it says, Vechol, and all asher that nadvo. Everyone that, it's not so much that they were willing, but their heart was willing. They got all excited about it. Their heart's all lifted up, and they're, and it's saying willing. They felt an excitement inside them. They felt an urge, a sense of, I got to be a part of this inside them. Then it says, Rucho, you hear Ruach, that's the same word, spirit, the breath. And again, that's something that is used literally of the breath that you breathe in and you breathe out. That's the wind that blows around on the planet. So they're using it of wind, and they use it of air that you breathe, and all of that sort of thing. But they also do the same thing with it that we do with the heart. It's the breath of life, the vital principle, which shows itself in breathing, as I said, and then it's the rational mind or spirit, the seat of the senses, the affections, the emotions. And in Hebrew, the heart and the mind are not two different things. If your heart is saying yes and your mind is saying no, well, you're in biblical Hebrew times, you were suffering from schizophrenia. So anyway, because they didn't talk about them as separate things. Yes, they had separate words for it, but they didn't talk about them as separate things. Then it says oto, which we would say with he, and that's okay. It's actually from the word et, which has no meaning. It's just a pointer. But then it's followed with heavy u, brought they. So it's the same word we started off with, to come, to go, to enter a place is the same as to exit a place. I know that's difficult in English to get your head around, but there's still a lot of languages out there that do this to this day. The same word is used, and when it's translated, it can be very confusing because we have to go and come. We have to went and arrive. You know, I mean, we have very specific words for these, but they use the same word for all of this. Yeah, so I have, they've added this hey at the beginning that makes it he feel. So it's more of the idea in our thinking of brought. They brought something because they made something come from one place to another. We would say they brought it or they're bringing it or something like that. And so we put it in this thing we call he feel, and that's just kind of what he feel does. It changes it from we made it come to we brought it. That's the best way I know how to explain that. Then it's followed by the word et, which again is a pointer. It has no real meaning. Has a purpose, but not a meaning. Then it's terumat. You hear the word offering in that. They say this word is used for an oblation, a gift, an offering gift, especially used of the gift brought to the temple and the priest, a heave offering, because it's used of the ones that were lifted up. And it's an offering, of course, to Yahweh. We use God's proper name here. And then it's li me lechet. All right, so this is to work. This is properly service, hence work prescribed to anyone, prescribed to anyone, especially of the work of an artisan. I don't know why that has... Okay, so the root word here is la'ach, to send a messenger, to be sent, to wait on someone, which is, in biblical terms, to minister to somebody is to wait on them. So when you see these women who wait on their husband's hand and foot, what you're seeing is a wife or a woman, sometimes it's not a wife, that is ministering to their husband or ministering to someone else's husband. Oh, it's scandalous, All right, then we go into some cussing. Y'all have to cover your ears. Now, it's the Hebrew word ohel, which means tent in English. So we're going to be talking about, of course, the tabernacle, because it's the ohel moed, the tent of meetings, tent of appointed times, because their meetings that they had in these tents were appointed. You had the one that's appointed every Shabbat. Every Saturday morning we go to the tent, or in our case, to the computer. This is our ohel moed, is our computer, if you will. It's our appointed times, our appointed meetings, and it's the place where it takes place on the internet. You could really go there. It wouldn't be a big lie to quote Eusebius when he was talking about the founding of the religion that he didn't even have a name for in his time. He said, yeah, we haven't been around since the beginning. We're brand new, in fact, but we pretend that we've been around from the beginning. And to say so wouldn't shoot far from the truth. It's a lie, but it's not a big one. Now, anyway, this isn't a lie. It's a connection we could make. Ulechol, and to all avodato. So it's all of his service. That's the labor, it's the work, it's the business that you run. It says rustic labor in the Jacenius, which I am assuming he's talking about agriculture. And then specifically sacred service, used of particular sacrifice or sacred ceremonies, particular sacred ceremonies, things like that. But it's beyond that. This is servile work. This is what you do for a living, regardless of who you are. What you do for a living is your servile work. And just because you don't do it for a living doesn't mean you're allowed to on Shabbat. I'm just throwing that in there. This is Ule Vide. And according to the garments, because remember, we're talking about the service in the temple, right? In this appointed place. So, and of the garments, that's the things that they wear. It was all of them, not just the ephod or the talit, the undergarments, the breeches, as they were called in what they call the Breeches Bible. Yeah, there's a Bible called Breeches, the Breeches Bible, because they use the word breeches in it. Anyway, it's an English Bible, by the way. So it's all of those garments, ha-kodesh, all of the holy garments. So these are all garments that are set aside for the service of the holy. I told you last week, I have garments like that. For instance, the talit that I'm wearing right now is only worn for the service I wear it when I teach on Shabbat, because that's an appointed meeting. I wear it when I always kind of teach, but when I'm leading the feast, the Pesach and the Sukkot, and all of those other feasts of God, I wear these very same clothes that I'm wearing today. Now, I do have several different shirts. And that's what I was going to say last week when I was talking about time to send in some money. I forgot to say the other part, because your rabbi needs some new shirts. I went to take one off last week, and it ripped as I was taking it off. These things have gotten so old that they're coming apart at the seams, literally. Anyway, I forgot to say that part, but a special offering for that would be nice. I'm a little low on funds personally. Here's your translation. And they went forth, every man whose heart was uplifted and whose spirit was willing. Again, this is not 2 bullet points. Your heart being uplifted and your spirit being willing are not 2 different things. They are the same thing. It's called a parallelism. It's the same thing being said in 2 different ways. All right, so, and whose spirit was willing. And they brought the offering to Yahweh for the work of the Ohel Moed, the tent of appointed times, and for all its service and the holy garments. So all of the things that were used for these purposes were brought by donation. The clothing wasn't brought by donation. The fabric was brought, and then from that fabric, clothing was sewn. In our case, please don't send us fabric. Because that would mean that Donna has to do a lot of sewing that we can just go to the store. It's cheap, it's quick, it's easy. I'm just saying. Anyway, Kasuda wrote that the words, whoever is of a generous heart, from verse 5, is now being rewarded, every man whose heart was lifted up, because it is a poetic parallelism used to repeat a thought, but with different words. Oh, that's funny. Seems like something I just said. All right, verse 22. Oh, it's another long one. And he went, they, the men, upon the women, all willing heart, brought they nose ring, and earrings, and signet rings, and necklace, all implement gold, and all man that wave offering gold to Yahweh. That's funny. This goes with something we were talking about just last night. All right, starts off va, bo, u. Hey, that sounds familiar. That's the same word we had a while ago. That's to come and to go. And he went they. So, and they went. We don't put the he part of it in English when we translate. We say, and they went, instead of and he went they. But that's just the little things that are added to the beginning and the ending of a word that does that. But it's the idea of coming and going, it's all the same thing in Hebrew. And then it says, ha'anashim, the men. It's, nashim is men in plural, well, anashim, but it's a man as opposed to a woman, right? It's the male. You could even use it for the word male, but I would say the men. It says upon, this is the word all. just A-L, not A-L-L. It's not an English word. It's the Hebrew word all. We usually put the word upon when we say all, because all is something that is built upon something. It's like you pour a slab, and on that slab you build a building, right? And so something that's built on top of something else. And they say it so as to stand or lie upon it. Or have it for a substratum. So it's the idea of a slab and something built on it. Use it a state of rest, to lie on a bed because you're on top of the bed. Being high, being suspended over something without touching it. Somehow you're floating, so they had spaceships and rockets and guys floating around in space back then. No, I'm just kidding. But it's of a motion, especially a rapid motion to or toward any place. This arises from the signification of rushing down upon anything, rushing between more swift and more rapid when downward. And this is ha-nashim, the women. So it may take a minute to explain that, but this is the women as opposed to men. So it's got the men on the women, literally. And I don't mean that literally. They weren't standing on their wife's shoulder or anything. And it's kol all nediv, all that were willing. This is the voluntary, the willingness, the spontaneity, the being spontaneous, to be liberal, to be generous. And so it's the men and the women who they're adding the women here. I'm not really sure why, but because when they speak in Hebrew, they speak in the masculine. And it's generally understood that if they're saying something like this is a law for the men, it's also a law for the women. They just say it in the masculine. You have that in some languages today. Spanish still has some of that. Not as much as it used to, but it does. So now we have lev. We've already talked about how that's the thing thumping in our chest, but it's also the seat of the mind and the affections and the emotions. And this is heavy, which, again, that's the come and the go. And in this case, putting the hey in front of it makes it they brought. So they brought something. Hach. Oh, I remember now why they're talking about the women the way they are. What you've got to understand is going on here is they've already laid it out in the previous verse that everyone of a willing heart ran off immediately that, I got to be a part of this. I got to give to this. I got to, help build this thing up and help. I just got to be a part. Well, they said it in the masculine, which is the proper way to do it. But now they're going to switch it up and talk about the feminine and the masculine. So they're going to say men and women. And when they're saying the men upon the women, they're talking about the rushing. Everybody is the man. We would say man and woman. In Hebrew, they say men on woman. But it's a conjunction in this case. But now we know why they're doing it, because they're saying nose ring. In their time, women wore nose rings. And Dawn and I were talking about this last night. I don't know if they wore it like a cow, in this little part down here, where people could pull on it and lead them around. I don't actually know. Because that part of the skin is going to be gone. And it would be very difficult to tell, even if the nose ring was still on a person after all this time, where that thing was worn. And let's say, I'm sure that there probably is an Egyptian that was, what do you call that when they mummified, that probably still had the nose ring in the nose. Well, that doesn't mean that's how the Jews did it. You know what I'm saying? And we know that some Jews were mummified, but they were slaves. And again, that may have been the way that the slaves were forced to wear them, and not the way that the Jews did. But the Jews, from the very beginning of the Bible, their women wore nose rings. And I'm just saying, I don't know if they put it on the side or in the middle, or I have no idea, but they did wear nose rings. It was a symbol of status, not a symbol of slavery. So it was decorative, just like today. It's still a little gross when somebody's got a hole over here and they sneeze and something blows out of that hole. I'm not down with it. Some people are. But we are talking about a nose ring. And this is Ve Nezem, and this is the rings that are worn. The word's really used for the rings that are worn in the nose and the ones that are worn in the ears. Now, the ones worn in the ears among the Jews it showed that those were slaves, right? We remember that from earlier laws. Then it says Ve Tabaat, and signet rings. These are seals. They're a ring with a seal on it, like your family crest or something. You know, you guys know what those are. Then it says Vechumaz, which, again, it's odd. I guess they were giving these signet rings away because what did it mean to the Jews? These were signet rings that belonged to the Egyptians, right? So let's bring them and let's melt them down because you wouldn't want to use those in your family crest, I wouldn't think. All right, so you got these signet rings, and then they were giving away necklaces. Then it says kol, which is all, keli, implements. Whatever is made, whatever is prepared, it's a utensil, it's a vessel. So it's all these implements for the implements, zahav, of gold, right? So they're bringing all this gold, the earrings, the nose rings, the necklaces, the signet rings, things like that, so that they can be melted down for the implements made of gold. And remember, gold is the word that means shiny and splendorous and stuff like that. That's what gold, the word gold, actually means. But we think of it as the material. Anyway, so it's Bechol, and all ish, all man, asher, which means that, and nif, wave. It's to wave, to shake. Like take a wave offering and that kind of thing. But it's not this. Just saying. Tenufat, a wave offering. Led me right to they're waving their hands with the wave offering. I showed you that gesture. Zahav, for the gold, and it says La Yahweh, so it's for God. So your translation, and they went forth, both men and women. So men upon women, will say it both men and women, because it's idiomatic. All who were willing of heart, and they brought nose rings and earrings and signet rings and necklaces, every implement of gold, and everyone that waved their offering of gold to Yahweh. Of the words where I put the idiom both men and women, the words literally were men upon women. Kasuda wrote, and they came, both men and women. He said it exactly the same way. Literally, the men upon the women, which is what the words literally said, so as to avoid the misapprehension that the expression everyone, literally every man, in the preceding verse refers to men only. In the continuation of verse 22 and in verses 23 and 24, the men are specifically mentioned, but the women are included by implication. Whilst in verses 25 and 26, the women are expressly referred to. In short, both men and women were included and involved at all times. Here's something wrong. Now, Maimonides wrote that the reason why the text said that the men were on top of the women was to express the idea that the men followed the women. After all, he said, it was the women who had the jewelry. The Seforno attempted to explain that certain customs existed in this time among this people, which of course did not, such that the husbands came to give approval of their wives' gifts. This is all Dark Ages nonsense. Of the words, and everyone that waved their offering. Kasuda wrote, one who presents a gift in a celebrative manner does so on his outstretched hands as though he were waving it. As though? I don't agree with that part. They were waving it. It's what the words say. They were waving the gift, so yeah. All right, verse 23. And all man that having acquired with he or with it violet and purple and scarlet, crimson and linen and goat's hair and skins, rams, so ram skins, from redness and skins brought they. So it's Behol and all ish, all men, asher that nimzah. That's literally we found. It's to come, which is to attain to arrive at something. It's usually a thought or a conclusion. To obtain, to acquire, to receive is also a usage of this word. So to obtain knowledge, happiness, favor. Also in a bad sense, it's to meet with calamity, to fall into. This word being in the fall is to be acquired by anyone, to find any person or thing properly to come upon. So you've been just walking down the road, minding your business, and all of a sudden you come upon some person in your path. All right, so this is Oto, with him. Techelet, there's your word for a violet color. It's a shellfish, a species of mussel found in the Mediterranean Sea. You know, it was thought to be extinct for quite a long time, and it has turned up by the droves in the Mediterranean Sea of late. But it's actually more of a blue color. They say violet, but I've seen it. It's on my Talib. You know, I've tried to show it to you, but I don't think you can really see it in here. But that's the color, and to me, that's blue. But anyway, we have that follows Ve'ar Gaman, and they say in purple, it's a reddish purple. Also comes from a shellfish in the Mediterranean. Then it says Vetolaat, and scarlet. That's from a worm, and that's really a crimson color, a blood color, if you will. And then it's shani, which they have as crimson. So these are very similar colors, obviously. Veshesh, so that's it's one of those words that the spelling can throw you off. This is the word for 6, right? But it's also something that's white, like white marble. As in the white linen that the priests wore, right? In fact, that may be even the word they use for linen. I'll have to think about that. But izim, and that's saying in she-goats. Then it says ve'irot, so that's the skins. Elim, that's rams. So we're the skins of rams, or we'd say ram skin. Now this says ma'adamim, which is literally from redness, to be red, from the root which means blood. Dam is the root. Their princes were whiter than milk. Their body was more ruddy than coral. That's Lamentations 4:7. Whiteness and rudiness belong to the description of youthful beauty. So they're not really telling you that it's white or that it's red or any of that sort of thing. They're telling you that these are young rams. You should remember that. We've had that already. Ve'irot, and skins. Techashim, and skins. Hevi'u, which is from that same word bow. They put the hay in front of it, so that makes it brought. So they brought. So your translation is then, and remember what happens when there's double words, right? And everyone that had acquired violet and purple and scarlet, crimson and linen. Yeah, shesh is the word for linen. And goat's hair, and it says from redness, so and young ram skins, and skins. Many skins they brought it. All right, even Ezra wrote that the words every man used in this verse should actually be translated as everyone, since men and women are both included. And that's okay. You can say that. I don't disagree with him at all. Verse 24, literally in English would be, all lifting up, offering silver and brass brought they, offering Yahweh, and all that having acquired with it, or he, trees, shittim, to all work the service brought they. So it's going to be a lot of the same words. Kol, which is all, me'arim, and there's to lift up, to raise up, to arise. Metaphorically, the heart is lifted up. That's a bad thing. Well, it's actually a good and a bad. You can be proud and that be a good thing. Like God looked at all that he had done and he said, this is good. You know, he was proud of what he did because what he did was worth being proud of. But when you're overly proud, you know, when you pervert it, it can then be a bad thing. So it's actually used in both ways. Terumat, that's your offering word. We've already had that. Kesef, do you remember this word? This is silver. It literally means silver, so-called from its pale color. The color itself is called kesef, right? But they also call money kesef because money was made of silver, right? Unechoshet, that's brass, copper. I've never really understood this word because I don't know the difference between brass and copper, or if they're both the same thing, two different words. They seem like there's something different. It seems like there's a different mixture or something like that. I don't do metal, so I don't know. But it depends on where you're looking. One will tell you brass and one will tell you copper. So there must be some heavy connection there. This is heavy. Remember that's from the word bow, which is to come and to go. Has the hay in front of it. That's a Hebrew word. It's the name of a letter, and that makes it hefil, which is brought. We would say brought. That's really all there is to this. It's et, that's a pointer. Te rumat, there's your word for offering. Yahweh, that's God's name. V'chol, and all asher, that. Nimza, which would literally be we found. To come, to attain, to arrive at. We just had this word. It's in the fall, to be acquired, to find any person or thing, to stumble upon them while you're walking down the road. Then it's oto, so it's with him or with it. Atzeh, now this is your word for tree. The tree is in plural anyway. It's a tree. It can be used of wood. It can be used of posts. Remember, in Hebrew, one word means a lot of things. So a post, since it's made out of a tree trunk, well, you use a word for tree. If it's a tree in the ground and there's fruit growing on it or not, leaves on it or whatever, it's just a tree, well, that's called a tree. And if it's a switch, they may even call it a tree. If it's used of a stake to hold the tent down, they'll still use the word for tree. If it's cut up into slats, they'll still call it a tree. One word covers a lot of things. Then it says shittim, so this is a specific tree. It's a large tree growing in Egypt and Arabia, having the bark covered with black thorns. It has blackish pods. The wood is very hard, and when it grows old, it resembles ebony. So it's a very black-colored tree itself. And so, of course, when it's cut up, the slats will be black as well. Lechol, that's to all. Melechet, there's your word again, that servile work, the stuff that you do for a living. Ha'avodah, so that's the service, the labor, the ministering that goes on. Hevi'u, and there's your word bow, is to come into all that, but remember it has the hey added to it at the beginning, the sound. That's they brought. So we translate it, everyone who brought them lifted the offerings and the things that they brought, lifted up offerings of silver and brass, offerings to Yahweh, and everyone that had acquired wood of shittim, or shittim wood, brought it for the work of the service. I bet that's some pretty wood too. I wonder if you could still see the grains in the black. I bet you could. I love it when you can see the grains. That's my thing. All right. And literally in 25, literal English is, and all women, wise heart in hand her, spun they, and brought they had spun, the blue and the purple, scarlet, the crimson, and the linen. All right, so you have the whole, it's, and all Isha, and all the women. Those are women of marrying age. These are grown women. Chachmat, wise. So these are the skillful women. These are the artistic ones, the artificers, the ones that create things with their hands. That's why they called them wise. Remember, wisdom said of the men as well. If you were really good at building things out of wood, they would call you a wise carpenter. If you could really good at building it out of metal, you were a wise metal worker. Just meant that you were very good at it. So these are the women that really excelled in whatever it was. And in this case, it's, what were they doing? Sewing stuff or making material or whatever it is. I guess we'll know here in a minute. So then it has the word for lev. They're wise-hearted. Be yadeha. So it's in their hands. Tavu, they spun. So these are the ones that spun the stuff and made the material to twist and all that kind of stuff. So they're the ones that make material. And it must have been a real big thing back then for you to be called wise at it. These would have been the ones that were just beyond measure, could really make something really pretty out of something. Vaya vi'u, and brought they, and they brought, we would say, mat they, that which they had spun, et ha techelet, which would have been the blue from the shellfish, ve'et, and ha-argaman, and the purple, et tolaat, and the scarlet, ha-shani, and the crimson, ve'et, and ha-shesh. Remember, that's that word that means 6, but also means linen. So, your translation, and every woman who was a craftsman, wise in heart, or craftswoman, I guess you could say, in hand spinning, brought that which they had spun, blue and purple, scarlet, crimson, and linen. They didn't just show up with some string. They arrived with something really spectacular that was made from the string, if you will. All right, 26 would literally say in English, and all the women that bear hearts whose in wisdom spun they goat's hair. All right, so you have the whole, and all Hanashim, that's your women, all the women Asher, that Nasa, that lifted up, that took up this endeavor, if you will, or took up the material. It can be either one, we don't know yet. Liban, or their heart was lifted up. There we go. I forgot about that one. O Tana, whose, it's really just that pointer again. We'll say whose in this case because it will help make sense in English. Behachma, whose heart was lifted up in wisdom, all of the artistic ones. Tavu, they spun, says et izim. So they also spun the hair from the she-goat. So your translation is, and every woman with uplifted heart spun the goat's hair in wisdom or in craftsmanship. Okay. And the Nesiim brought they stones the onyx and stones the installing to ephod and to breastplate. It says Veha Nesiim in Hebrew. You know this word, Nasi, Nesiim. These are the prince of the synagogue, is the Nasi. So if you have several of them, they're called the Nesiim. the Nasieh, different words to say it. These are the princes, the leaders of the tribes were called the Nasi. This is heavy U, so it's they brought that's pointing Avnei. Those are stones. It's from Evan, right? But when you put it in plural, it becomes Avnei. It's a stone of any kind. In this case, it'd be stones of any kind, whether rough or polished, very large or very small, used as the foundation stones of a house. But it's also, in this case, it would be the precious stones used for the ephod, because remember that word, right? Then it says ha-shoham. They say onyx. The truth is, and you got to keep this in mind, every stone out there, no matter what stone it is, whether it's onyx or, name me a stone or two, Donna. Opal or sapphire or, ruby, makes no difference. Every stone out there comes in every imaginable color. They all do. So the problem that we have is that these words are so old and so obscure, and without a dictionary from the time period, we don't know if that really is an onyx. We don't know if it's really an opal or really a diamond or any of those. We don't. We don't even know the colors. But these are not just wild hair guesses. They're mostly based on something that we have from the first century. Josephus wrote about it. He talked about what kind of stones they were and what colors they were. Well, whether that actually matches this time period, which is the time of Moshe, we don't know. But that's mostly how we're going by knowing what stone it is and what color it is because he talked about the ones that existed in his time period. All right, just thought I'd throw that in there. So Avnei, and stones, Hamiluim. So that's the inauguration. That's the installing of his position, if you will. La ephod. So this is the installing of the ephod, I think is how we say it in English. Ephod in Hebrew. That's that breastplate thing that had all the stones in it. Vela Hoshen. So it's breastplate that was called the ephod. All right, so we have, and the leaders of the synagogues, the Nesi'im, and the Nesi'im brought the onyx stones and installed the stones in the ephod and the Hoshen, in the breastplate. Ephod and breastplate being the same thing. Instead of accepting that these leaders probably knew what was proper for them to do, Rashi attempted to explain away a supposed sin committed here by the Nesi'im, as pointed out in the Sifrei by Rabbi Natan, by writing that the Nesi'im thought they meant well, though they meant well, committed a sin by being the last to make an offering here. Oy vey. He goes on. However, he wrote that they made things right by being the first to bring an offering at the dedication of the tabernacle. All ancient Hebrew was written in the order of association. The concept of writing things in the order of chronology simply did not exist among the ancient Yehudim, the ancient Jews. Thus the leaders, if it was proper, did in fact make their offering first. The story would have been very different had these leaders actually committed the sin to which Rashi and Natan so ignorantly accused them. All right, 28. And the spice and the fat to from light, and to fat, the anointing, and to incense, the spices. All right. It starts off ve'et, so that's a pointer. Haboshem, the spice. It's a sweet smell, especially such as spices emit. Cinnamon can be called a spice because it smells good, right? Ve'et, which means and, hashemen, and the fat. That's the fat, like if you smush an olive, the fat comes out. It's called oil. That's what we're talking about. Then it says, le ma'or, it was for light, right? You smush that fat out of an olive, and then you put a little wick in it, you can light it, right? So it's for the light. Ule shemen. And again, that's fat. Hamishcha, for anointing. So some fat is used for light, some fat is used for anointing oil. Ve'liketoret, and some of it's just used because it smells good. Ha-samim, the spices. So your translation is pretty simple. And the spices, and the oil for the lights, and the oil for the anointing, and I added the word oil after, and oil for spiced incenses. These were also brought as offerings. 29 says, well, now, what do we have? About 35 of these things, and we only at 13. I was hoping we get to the end, but I don't know if we're going to. Anyway, 29 literally says, all man and woman that willing heart them with them to bring to all the property that commanded Yahweh to make in hand, Moshe brought they children Yisrael, willing her to Yahweh. So here we have a sum up, because there's too much. Starts off kol, which is all, ish, all men or every man, ve'isha, and woman, every man and woman, asher, that nadav, that were willing. They felt that thing in their libam, in their heart, right? It's something just, oh, I got to be a part of this. I got to get in on the action here. All of the men and women who felt that way in their heart. Otam, which is the pointer, lehavi, it's to bring. They brought it, all these things that we've just talked about, the color and the colors, you know, the linen that was made in all these different colors, and the gold earrings and nose rings and signet rings, and you know, all of those people brought all of those things. Lecho, all hamed lacha, all the items. It's all the stuff that's going to be used for the service. Asher, that ziva, that was commanded. Because remember, God was very specific about, I want certain types of skins, and I want certain colors and certain materials, such as the shittim wood, which is a black color, and I want the anyway, I think you get the idea. So it says, so it was commanded by Yahweh, and they call him by his proper name, la'asot, the things that they brought so that they could make this stuff. This is the labor to work about, to manufacture, to fabricate, which is exactly what they did, right? There were those who were melting down the gold and melting down the silver, and there were those who were spinning the material, you know, spinning the stringy stuff to make material. I'm way out of my league here. I don't know about this type of thing. I've never done any of that or even seen it done, I don't think. So anyway, it says, Bigah, they brought it in their hand or placed it in the hand. It could be either one. Of Moshe, it says, Hevi'u. Now, I guarantee you they didn't place every last thing in the hand of Moshe. They're handing it to him and he's passing it on, right? Or he's stalking at someone. No, that's not what they mean. Hevi'u, they brought it. All of these things. B'nai, that's the children. And guess what? Yisrael, the children of Israel. Nedavah, they did it willingly. Nobody made them do anything. They were happy to do it. It says they did it la Yahweh. They did it for their God. So, your translation, every man and woman with a willing heart brought with them all the items that Yahweh commanded to be made by the hand of Moshe. Thus the children of Yisrael brought offerings willingly to Yahweh. Right? So, to avoid a misunderstanding here, there's not a mistake here. They're not saying first that the men and the women made all these things and then that Moses made them. No, Moses gave the order. They went out and they did it. They brought it and handed it, maybe not literally to him, but they brought it to his hand, to his authority, to his power. They gave it to him. They brought it because he's the one that asked for it. Kasuda wrote, the verse then has to be construed thus. In this way, by the voluntary contributions of every man and woman whose heart moved them to bring anything for the work which the Lord had commanded by Moses to be done, the children of Israel brought a free will offering to the Lord. All right, now, of the next verse, let's see. Yeah, it's kind of short. We can probably do it. Kasuda wrote the following. At the very time that the children of Israel were bringing their contributions for the construction of the tabernacle, Moses announced the selection of the craftsmen who would be in charge of the work. You know what? I think we'll go ahead and stop here, and I'll pick back up with this because we're shifting gears a little bit, not a whole lot. We're still on the construction and all that, but we are going to shift gears a little bit here, and I think this is a good cutting off point for this week. We'll pick up with verse 30 next week. Shalom, shalom, y'all.